while phones to silent. And for the purposes of the recording and the transcript, I'd be grateful if everybody who speaks could ensure that the name has been stated. So we've been with introductions. I'm Deputy Helen Miles. I'm Chair of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel. Lucy Stevenson, the Vice Chair.
Constable David Johnson, Panel Member.
Deputy Jonathan Renniff, Panel Member.
Deputy Alex Curtis, Panel Member.
Deputy Lyndon Farnham, Chief Minister.
Deputy Malcolm Ferry, Assistant Chief Minister.
Wiley, Chief Officer of the Cabinet Office.
Andrew McLaughlin, Chief Executive.
Andy Heckwell, Group Director of Strategic Finance.
Jason Whitfield, Chief Information Officer.
Thank you very much. We've got 2 hours allocated for this hearing. We have got a lot of questions, so I suspect we might need the full 2 hours, but
We'll try and give you
never know.
swift answers.
So, swift answers can be good. So if I can just kick off, really. Chief Minister, the latest media headline talk about precarious finances. And certainly the Public Accounts Committee recently heard that the Stabilisation Fund is exhausted, Consolidated Fund is precarious, the Strategic Reserve is underfunded and therefore too small. We also heard that we're spending more than we're bringing in. So I think the first question for you is, how do you think this budget is going to tackle those issues?
Okay, so if we take a step back, and when this government came into office, we could, it was almost intuitive that there was an exponential growth happening that had been happening for some time, and the cost of running the government had grown exponentially since 2018. And since then, we've done a significant amount of work to understand that, and we started to react to it in relation to recruitment freezes, consultancy freezes, and so forth. But you know, the government, the ship of our small island state, it's a bit like an oil tanker, and it's going to take time to turn that around. What we've done with this government, we've curbed the growth in certain areas, and we've directed funds to the key areas, such as health, education, public safety, and so forth. And the Capital Investment Fund also is a proposal to address the pressure on capital expenditure, the public realm and the infrastructure, which I think has suffered because we've tended to divert monies that could have gone into that to deal with the increased revenue expenditure. So we see this budget as a starting point. We realise we can't deal with it just by curbing the growth in public expenditure. And if we go back, I think it was to 1996 when I think it was Terry Laswell was Social Security Committee President, of the foresight that went into establishing the funds that we have now. I think we need to start going back to a more thoughtful place of how we do that now for the next 25 years.
Thank you. Do you accept that there's a structural deficit in that spending is running ahead of income in the longer term?
Well, I'm not sure what the definition of that is. The budget's a balance, but we have been, since the pandemic, relying on our reserves to balance the books.
Does the Chief Executive agree with that assessment?
Well, I think that's a complicated question to answer, because within the context of a 1.3 billion budget, I think any government has choices, particularly if they take a long and medium-term view of it. So I think it's possible still in Jersey to balance the budget, depending on the choices that you make. Whether it's advisable, of course, is almost a democratic issue. So I don't think I would use those terms. I think we've had tremendous cyclical pressures on the budget, occasioned by particularly the pandemic, but also Brexit and some other things have really been disruptive to the public service and brought costs into the public service that maybe were difficult to envisage. It's still my view that, as the Chief Minister said, with a kind of thoughtful debate about the facts as we now find them, which we're trying to have with the Com and with the Assembly, and with a thoughtful approach akin to that taken by people like Terry Liswer years ago and others, then it's possible actually, I think, to manage within our means. But it will need choices.
Okay.
It will need choices to be made.
You talked about balanced budgets. What is the prediction for the 2025 deficit currently?
I'm just going to make sure that I don't get misquoted. Andy, do you want to give us the accurate position?
So looking at a deficit, and there's an updated forecast that went into the budget, if the Assembly agree with the proposals to reduce the Social Security grant in 2025, there would be a deficit of 8.5 million after depreciation.
Okay, so in last year's budget, it was agreed to make the grant to Social Security Fund from the consolidated fund of 50 million. The request is that now does not happen.
So no, the grant would still be paid to an extent. It's reduced by 50 million in 2025. That is one of the proposals in the budget.
But when was the decision made to retrospectively request that an additional 50 million be not paid to the Social Security
So that's
Fund?
in the proposition for this budget, as part of that budget amending last year's.
Okay, but when was the decision made to do that? Because you've talked about balanced budgets, and clearly the budget for 2025 would not have balanced.
I understand. So the decision was made as part of the overall decision-making for the budget 2026. As part of that, obviously, there were updated economic assumptions that were produced, and that in turn led to an updated income forecast, which underpins all of the finances. So that's the money that's coming in that pays for those services. As part of that, we had seen some of the economic conditions leading to lower forecasts for income. We saw the outturn in 24 was slightly lower than predicted. 25 was forecast to be slightly lower than. It's still growing. See, that's the thing where we have to talk about it. Income is still growing over the period. It's just growing at a slower rate. That means that part of Com's decision making in terms of, well, how do you get the books back into balance before you think about the other decisions you might want to make? The Social Security grant in 2025 was part of those package of measures to bring the books into balance.
Sorry, I was just going to add,
Of course.
the prime reasons for that was, as Andy said, it was a reduction in the actual income and the increased expenditure in health. Those were the two key areas that led to that.
So, so part of it is the increased expenditure in health, but the number that you quoted there is 8 million.
So the forecast for 2025 in the budget
After
is
depreciation.
after depreciation. So that's
Depreciation. Okay, thank you. I think
What is
that's
the predicted depreciation? Just a matter of.
depreciation is 59 million.
okay, thank you. Just moving on to some of common strategic sort of policy priorities. You've clearly explained in previous hearings about how money is you want to target the common strategic policies. But can you talk to us about any challenges that you've had in respect of departments delivering on their specific ministerial priorities in the business as usual work streams? You know, have ministers had to stop or delay doing things that they really wanted to do because you've created the environment where they have to focus on those CSP priorities?
I think the recruitment freeze has helped because that stopped departments pulling on extra staff to do other things, and they've reprioritised. And I believe that all departments are primarily focused on the CSP delivery.
I think my question was about what about ministerial priorities that are out with the CSP. So, you know, we've heard in questions that we've asked in the Assembly ministers why they haven't done things. They've said we haven't done things because there is a recruitment freeze and this would have been my priority.
But do you know that's one of the challenges we're grappling with the money? At some stage, we've got to stop doing the nice to have things and focus on the priorities, and that's what we've been trying to do. So there could be some ministerial priorities that we haven't been able to afford.
And that I think is the nub of the question. You know, how do you lead that? How do you square the circle with your ministers who want to do things but can't because you've put a recruitment freeze in place?
All of the meetings we've had, ministers have been collegiate, work well together. They understand the challenges. So I'm certainly not aware of any ministerial pressure from any ministers that they can't do things that they would really like to do, because actually we managed to include most of that in the CSP and the budget. For example, the improvements to the fire and rescue service, the extension of nursery care, and education increase. CSP, sorry, beg your pardon. The extension of the nursery care is enabled by an additional £4 million, I think, as proposed in the budget. So a lot of, I would think the vast majority of the increase in revenue expenditure in the budget is based on the delivery of the CSP priorities.
Can you explain what in-year progress has been undertaken to demonstrate delivery of the 2025 budget proposals, and how do you know whether they've been successful?
So I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
Do you mean as they relate to the CSP or
In general?
Yeah, so as they relate to the CSP, and I think the whole point of the CSP is it's a prioritised document for government, because we can't do everything. And of course, when you then back it up with recruitment freeze and consultancy freezes, it does close off some of the avenues that were previously available to do work outside of the CSP. So there is a concertinaing effect towards the CSP, which is maybe what you were referring to in the last question. But the Council of Ministers get a full quarterly update on progress of each item in the CSP, whether it's on track, if it's on track, what's been done to remediate the situation. So there's a quarterly update on CSP progress, and particularly as it relates to the budget that was set. And
are ministers satisfied with the kind of quality and depth of that quarterly reporting?
I'm not aware of any.
To say that every minister is content would be a gamble, but I'm not aware of any on any pressing issues. They haven't been raised. If they're not content, haven't been raised with me.
If I give an example, when were you first made aware of the overspend on health through the reporting mechanisms? Because health were topped up quite significantly last year, and you've had to top them up again quite significantly in this year's budget. So how does the reporting mechanism alert you as a council of ministers to the fact that these things are coming down the track?
We're kept up to date by Treasury, and we've been sort of following the health budget almost every step of the way. Andy, do you want to just?
Yeah, so COM obviously received quarterly reporting on finances, which is separate to CSP, but we do take a quarterly report to COM. But we have also been highlighting to ministers where there were pressures. So some of the pressures that we're seeing in health this year did manifest towards the end of 2024. I get my years right, sorry. But obviously the budget was set earlier on in the year. So we knew some of it was coming anyway, and it was something that Treasury had been actively working with the Health Department to make sure that we were proactively managing it as we could. As you got through the monthly reporting that we get starting in February, and then the first quarterly that went to COM was the March reporting. We highlighted there were overspends. We've been working with the Health Department to try and put as many mitigating actions as possible in those, and some of those have brought that forecast down as we go through the year.
Okay, thank you. So is there a mechanism to track whether departmental and cross-cutting outcomes are aligned with the common strategic priorities? And how is accountability maintained when your kind of performance discussion is informal at ELT?
I'm not sure I understand the question. We actually get monthly financial reports. I get monthly financial reports on every budget, and I follow up with, if we're talking about health in that case, with the health team. There's nothing informal about it.
I think what I'm trying to get at is the performance gap. So you told us at the last hearing that performance was cross-cutting performance was not always discussed at executive leadership team, and much of the coordination actually happens more informally than formally. So I think what we're trying to get at is how do you address those performance gaps relative to the budget proposals, and how do you identify them if you're not doing anything formal to pull them across departments?
Could you exemplify just to...
So, for example, the issue about children's well-being, children's health, it's an important outcome. But obviously, you've got children's health is actually within SIPES.
Yeah.
You've got the play strategy. You know, all of those things need to come together to meet that outcome. And if you haven't got somebody looking at that strategically, how do you understand how each of those elements are working towards delivering your common strategic priority?
So perhaps I can explain how it works on the ground, and then we can work up from there. So for want of a better word, appraisals, what we're now calling connected performance, these are interviews that are conducted 3 times a year to make sure that the staff are working towards government objectives. And what we found was those interviews were slightly underutilised, and not everybody was receiving one of those interviews. So exactly as you described, Chair, you know, the way that SIPES interacts with children and young people and make sure that it's delivering on those objectives. So because there was a push up to mid-year of this year to make sure that everyone had a mid-year review, that has increased from 51% in 2024 to 74% this year.
I understand that from the operational level, but how is that coming up into the up into the strategic level if ELT are doing that informally?
Yes.
I don't know if you've... I don't know if I didn't explain myself terribly well the last time around. So I'm not entirely sure of the line of questioning, but to use the example you gave of, I think, which was children's services as an example, there's nothing informal about that at ELT. We look very closely at the community risk register. We look very closely, obviously, at the CSP because it's the priority for the current government. We look very closely at the BAU issues as they move around on that risk register, or as they may have some impact on the CSP. So in the case of children's services, it was clear to us from performance data, both from turnover colleagues in that service that comes up to us through detailed reports and dashboards we get on colleagues. It was clear to us from the finance data in terms of the preponderance of agency staff and all of the turnover related to that. And it was clear to us from deep diving into the service that we had real challenges in that service, and it was presenting in the risk register. In that instance, even though it wasn't core to the CSP, we had a very deep dive strategic review of the service. We brought a full strategy presentation to the LT, not informally, formally, twice. We then took that to the Council of Ministers and had a full debate. Same is true of our consideration of the risks as we see them around the fire aspects of the fire service at the moment. So there's nothing informal about this. This is very, very formal.
Thank you.
Approach.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to Deputy Mayor.
I'm going to kick off with a couple of questions about the performance framework, and particularly the sustainable wellbeing points. I wonder, first of all, I mean, the law says that sustainable wellbeing needs to be taken into account in producing the budget. I wonder if, Chief Minister, if you can outline what your understanding of what sustainable wellbeing is.
Well, it's about improving the community, the economic and environmental well-being of Jersey over the longer term. I think Jersey's been at the forefront of best practice, implementing well-being in government decision making. I mean, we're required by the Public Finances Law to consider sustainable well-being of islanders over successive generations when preparing the budget at the highest level. That's the key one, which is linked to the thinking behind the common strategic policy and most government policy. So that's, I can go further into it when interested.
Do you consider sustainable well-being at the beginning of the budget process?
I think as a government, this government, last government, previous governments, I think that's what drives them. That's what drives most of us as politicians, is the well-being of the island. And I think we've probably focused more on the sustainable well-being over the longer term in the last 2 years after, what we've learned in the last 2 years. And that's why, for example, we're looking at a longer term approach to capital funding. So the answer to that is yes, I believe we have.
But then how do you track accountability in terms of delivering on sustainable well-being?
Yeah, it's the same framework. So I think in this, if you look at the now infamous £500 million growth in the budget since 2018, the majority of that money has been spent on this area of island-wide indicator, or this area of Future Jersey. Community wellbeing has been the biggest draw on resources, which is probably inevitable when you have a pandemic and other things. So when the CSP was set right at the start, and in those workshops, the frame for all the CSP discussions was Future Jersey and island-wide indicators. That's in every workshop, that's where they start. How does this relate to each part of the island-wide indicators? And I think if you sort of audit your way through the CSP and just to the discussion with the chair about some of the community risk register issues, it's still the case that community wellbeing has become almost after the fact, as it were, the biggest draw on resources, whether that's nursery education, preventative health care, children's services. These are all in that category, but it's very much related to the island-wide indicators. That's the anchor for the CSP and the way we measure progress.
It's all explained on pages 14 to 17 of the budget.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is I can see that people are thinking about it, but what is the measure or measures that are used to drive accountability? How do we know whether we're meeting those objectives?
Yeah, well, I think we discussed this maybe at the last session here, but there are many. But if you were looking for a big macro one, we thought there's something that gives you a snapshot. Definitely the OECD Better Life Index, which Jersey almost alone amongst the Crown dependencies chose to participate in and invest in. That's a very, very important benchmark, which contains a whole load of quality of life indicators, which gives us a comparative benchmark with other places. So that's I would say that's one example.
Very specifically, in response to our recommendation to last year's budget review, recommendation 16, you commented that in addition to demonstrating a clear link between the budget, the CSP and sustainable wellbeing, that ministerial submission templates were being revised to include more explicit consideration of the 3 sustainable wellbeing themes as part of the policy development process. Have those ministerial templates been revised?
I can speak to that. Yeah. Yes, they have.
And what changes were made?
So in the template is designed to allow the minister, the reader, to note the issue, to identify the timescale, to see very clearly what the official level recommendations are, and then goes into the kind of summary of the substantive issue. There's then a section which we call kind of rights and well-being indicators, and within there we ask that all of these ministerial submissions specifically call out the effect on community, economic, environment. And there's a separate, more detailed annex which explains to the policy officer drafter how to make sure that this is done thoroughly and then summarised in that document.
Are those documents visible at all outside of the ministerial process?
I'm happy to send them to you if you would like.
Okay, thank you. Moving on slightly, can you explain steps taken to assess and manage key risks that Jersey faces, current and future generations, when developing the proposed budget? And how was analysis conducted to ensure that assessment is consistent across departments? So that's key long-term risks for the island.
Do you want to?
Yeah. So we the focus for that very much is the risk register. We have a whole governance infrastructure and series of meetings around that risk register
and exercises from time to time.
Indeed, and various risk exercises, and we will decide based on those discussions whether to move those issues from the risk register, for example, into the budget process in any one time period, depending on how they're presenting. and in fact, as I mentioned earlier, the sort of elevation of the risks as the Council of Ministers saw around the facilities for some of our most vulnerable children, the elevation of some of the risks relating to improvement in fire services and safety, they came through that route. They were elevated up, and they'll jump across into the budget process because we believe that the risk has reached a point where some sort of immediate response is required. So that's how the infrastructure runs. I think I guess don't guess, it's a matter of fact, the same things happen with cyber and cyber-related risks, although that happened, earlier in the year.
Can I just come on to the Social Security Fund and the decisions around that? Budget depends, balancing the books depends on reducing the Social Security contributions, and you've stated that, the Chief Minister, that you think this can be done without damaging the long-term viability of the Social Security Fund. Can you explain on what basis you're confident that the long-term viability will not be affected?
Well, on basis, I'm confident on the advice and the facts and figures received through Treasury, which I'm sure Andy can remind you of. Also, we're going to have an actuarial review of the fund next year, I believe, and that's going to start, which will I think, give us a more accurate guide of what we need to put into it over in the medium to longer term. We've been operating on a formula, I think, that was last reviewed 15 years ago. The fund has grown from between 2022 and the end of 2024 by almost £450 million. That's well in excess of what we'd planned. Andy, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, so very happy to, Chief Minister. So without going into too much detail, I think you all know how the fund works. But the proposition in 1996, the Chief Minister referred to earlier on, where it changed contributions, the entire intention of that was to shift from a pay-as-you-go scheme where people who were contributing today were paying for the pensions of today to a fund that was partly funded and had a reserve. So in that proposition, it talked about getting to 5 times of benefit expenditure. We're currently sitting at over 7. So it is true that it's been successful. We've been very lucky with that foresight, and the fund, with its investment performance, has actually managed to produce a bigger reserve than originally envisaged by that proposition. So that's a good thing. We should all be very happy that we have that security. What it does mean is that because those investments compound as well, the expectation, and when the actuaries will confirm whether or not this is the case, that the fund will be sustainable or potentially even continuing to grow into the future as well. That report, the actuaries, they're professionals, they are paid to do that, but certainly making a change in this budget will not damage the long-term prospects
Andy,
of the fund.
can you just clarify, if this budget goes through, are we still in excess of the 5 times reserving policy that Terry Lesueur put into the original proposition?
Yes, that's correct. So based on the forecasts which are included in the budget for the fund balance through it, by the end of the period, you're still at 7.
So we had the Social Security Minister appear before the panel, the Health and Social Security panel, and she mentioned that there was a letter from the actuaries that she had sought advice to be confident about this. That letter was sent in confidence to the panel. Given the centrality of this issue to the budget, would you be prepared to make that advice public?
I think it's up to the Social Security Minister. Basically, I'm not sure there would be a particular issue with that. I'm not sure. You have to check with the actuaries. I'm not sure whether they wrote it for public consumption. Well, we'll ask the question, yeah.
I'm slightly surprised by that answer because the whole budget hinges on this money and this claim being that it doesn't affect the Social Security Fund. As far as I can see, that is the only document that provides any kind of air cover for that statement. Are you saying you haven't seen it?
Yes, I've seen it. Of course, I've seen it, and I don't agree with you that it's the only thing that provides air cover, because we have actually confidence in our Treasury forecasts on it. And you know, it's something that we're going to have to agree on as an assembly moving forward. You could be right insofar as there might be an appetite actually to continue putting more money into the fund than we need to, and then reduce spending in other areas. That's something this government has taken a decision on, and we've decided to prioritise the things we really need to, rather than put more money than we need to into the fund. So again, I have no problem with transparency and that, but it's something that the Social Security Minister will have to square with the actuaries.
But would you be prepared to
I'd-
lend your weight to that? Given that you're trying, I presume, to build a consensus around this, surely to have as much information in the public domain would be helpful.
I'd have no problem with that at all.
But just if I may add, I guess there is additional commentary. If you look to the past, so over the last few years, as the Chief Executive and the Chief Minister have mentioned, we've been going through a pandemic and then recovering from it. So the grant has not been paid into the Social Security Fund at all for a period of time. And during that period, the fund still grew and hasn't shrunk in terms of the level of expenditure cover that's there. Through this budget, we'll still be putting 184 million into the fund. That's more than we've done in the past period. So
I think
that's
this
some
is
of the
really
comfort.
important for public confidence, because people are want to get the wrong impression. No money was been going in because it was suspended during COVID for all the reasons you know. This budget's putting 184 million in. Is restarting contributions. That's number one. Number two, you don't need an actuarial letter to know that the current reserves are 40% higher than what was seen as the comfort level when it was set up in 1996, which was 5 times. You're sitting at 7 times. Even after these changes in this budget, you're still at 7 times. So you're still overfunded versus the original intention of the fund. So I think it's very important that these facts are understood, and that people don't be alarmed and think that money's been taken out of the fund when the opposite's the case, or that the fund may be underfunded when it's a matter of fact that it's overfunded.
Could I ask a bit further on that? Because those are parameters that were deemed right at the time, but we have since had actuarial reviews that look at the long-term sustainability, and the last one in 2021 did forecast multiple scenarios in which, notwithstanding it would be 7 times now, the fund would be depleted at 2066 or 2081 based on migration patterns. So is it not the case that the parameters that were thought of earlier
Well, again, let's just anchor ourselves. The original intention of the fund was to be depleted by when?
So as the population bulge went through, there wasn't necessarily a specific period, but certainly by that period it would. So you're right. The chief executive is right. The original intention of that proposition was to build up the fund to around 5 times, to allow it to then supplement income as the ageing population came through. So it should go up and then come down again. That was the original intention. The 2021 actuarial report, in what we would consider the central scenario, which is, I think, plus 325 population growth, you actually see that the fund remains constant as you go out through. It's more or less a flat graph. So that is better than the original intention.
Wasn't that the plus 700 net migration that stays constant? It was the plus 325 forecast 2081. It's chart 2.1.
I don't have it open above. I'll have to check and come back to you. Okay. But certainly, it being extinguished into the 2080s would be in line with the existing, with the original intention of it. If it starts to stabilise, that's better than the original intention.
Just to close this off, I mean, I think the Chief Executive has raised in talking to the Public Accounts Committee the long-term sustainability of the finances. We've stopped paying into the strategic reserve, as the Chair said. We haven't replenished the stabilisation fund. This is the last fund left that we have to draw on to try and balance the books. Is it not concerning that, given that the pressures on things like the long-term care fund, the health insurance fund, that we are now running down, or not running down, reducing our contributions, reducing the resilience of this fund at a time when all those other long-term funding issues still remain?
You know, whilst being mindful of the longer term, and as I said at the beginning of my opening address, that's something, that's a culture, a behaviour we have to get back into pretty quickly. I'm confident that the action we're taking will not have any detrimental effect on the Social Security Reserve as outlined by the commentary we just had from officials. And that needs to be clear, because it's important that, you know, islanders retain confidence, and they should have confidence in the excellent reserves we do have. I'm not sure, I think that we are, the pre-19 taxes is topping up the strategic reserve, and Andy will have to say, have we done that this year with the returns?
By the end of the year, we will be transferring the full of the PYB debt into the strategic reserve in
Which
advance
is?
of it beginning. It's just less than 300 million.
Just so there is provision to increase the strategic reserve. What we are, the general reserve and Andy, remind me, two reserves we're
The stabilisation fund and the
stabilisation fund.
strategic reserve. Yeah.
That's another conversation we have to have, because they were exhausted during COVID, and I think we're going to have to look at
But
them
the
back in.
long-term, we're engaging in this budget in long-term spending commitments beyond the four-year period, health, education, early years care, and yet the funding mechanism runs out in 4 years' time. I think you've accepted that there will need to be a restarting of contributions.
Well,
so is
Do you
that
mean to
not
the
a
Social
structure?
Security
Yes.
Fund? It's just really, I don't want to be pedantic, but we're putting 184 million into that fund in this budget. So the restarting has started.
But the formula would have been 432, and you know, so it's a significant reduction on what you would have done.
I
and
was
you
just
can-
clarifying, we are putting money in.
I fully understand that.
We're not
the
taking
point,
money out,
but the
we're
point
putting money in.
I'm making is that fund we'll have to start increasing again at some point in the future.
Yeah.
But the funding commitments we've entered into are long term. Is that not essentially kicking the can down the road?
No, I don't think it is at all. And again, just want to reiterate the state of the fund, the earnings of the fund, the size of the fund, the 7 years reserve running at 40% higher than was anticipated. But of course, you make a valid argument. There might be some members that think, hang on a minute, we should not invest money in a lot of the things we're wanting to do in the public sector to address the underspends and the lack of investment in certain areas, such as children's services. It's a decision for the Assembly. If there's a strong argument to put another 400 million into a fund that's overperforming and not spend it on these things, that's a valid point to make. Our strong view is this is the right course of action.
I'm saying, I'm not against it necessarily, Chief Minister. I want to see the evidence, and that's why my questioning at the beginning
Well,
was
I'm
about.
not sure how many times I can say yes, but yes, we're totally confident that this is the right position for us to take at this stage.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I've just got some questions around Jersey performance framework. We noted in the last hearing that there's some disparities in the analytic capacity across departments, largely due to resource constraints. Some departments have got dedicated analysts within departments, so education, health, others have less data-rich areas. How might this be addressed so that all departments benefit from equal levels of data gathering and monitoring?
Paul will take this.
Yeah, so the Chief Statistician has that role across government to ensure that both the statistics Jersey Tier 1 statistics are resource adequately and delivered, but then there's also sufficient activity in each area. I know, for example, he's working hard with the police and crime team to introduce more transparent and regular data on that front. You know that from the panel you work on. So it's an active area of interest. I'm not aware of any areas which are kind of flagging as a problem at this stage, but happy to look into it more deeply.
I think it sort of links to previous questions about, you know, how does the uneven distribution undermine the ability of the executive leadership team and ministers to compare departments kind of fairly?
We just don't see the world the same way on this, I'm afraid. So we've got big public service departments, big waterfronts, health, education, IE, which do have more data and analytical resources, partly because they are on front of public service and they gather data and they're a source of gathering data which is vital to the whole of government. Obviously that's the case with health and education, for example. And then we have departments which I think are more civil service departments. They're policy orientated departments rather than having big frontline waterfronts. It's not obvious to me that they can't do their jobs well relying on the Centre of Excellence, which is the statistics unit within the civil service. So I think at some point we'll have to have a bigger debate about the difference between these big public service departments and these ones which are more anchored in what one might regard as a civil service. And some of those are very small departments, of course. So we feel the balance is about right with the resources we've got, and we don't look at it on a fair shares basis. We prioritise and we look at where's the need greatest, and we make sure that the resources are allocated to that.
Okay, thank you. You talked about the statistics unit. The Chief Statistician told us last time as well that there is a need to develop more indicators, and that there is a need to do further work, because actually we do need to understand. I don't necessarily agree with your perspective, the Chief Executive. Mm-hmm. So what steps have been taken to fill the gaps in measurement where these indicators haven't yet been developed?
I think we'd have to ask the Chief Statistician for that level of detail, I'm afraid.
And I think what we're really getting at is that if you haven't got the right information, how can you develop appropriate budget proposals and treat departments fairly, as opposed to this kind of salami slice that's going on?
So I wouldn't characterise it as salami slicing. As the Chief Minister and Chief Executive said at the start, we started this budget process with the corporate risk register, the community risk register, but equally with the island outcome indicators. And it's no coincidence that those areas that are flagging red on the indicators are the ones that we've consistently invested in terms of children.
But I guess the point is that they're flagging red because the work is being done. There might be other areas that would be flagging red if we had better data gathering and better evidence.
Yeah, no, we can accept that. We'd take that on board. Yeah.
Do you think Stats Jersey is suitably resourced in 2026 to deliver on what they're required to deliver?
So I went through a process with the Chief Statistician, and we met formally with the Chief Minister to determine whether that was the case. It's a matter of record, because I had an exchange of letters with the Chief Statistician that he did bid for some additional monies, around 80,000 in 26 and 120,000 in for recurring after that, in order to produce the kind of governance and administration that goes along with this new function. That's primarily in the annual report space, and I'm the accountable officer. I determined that that's desirable, not essential, and lifting ourselves back up to that kind of curbing the growth agenda. That was one area that we needed to sacrifice.
Under Article 4.3 of the new Statistics and Census Law, Minister must make an annual assessment of the funding required to ensure that the statistician is provided with financial administrative.
Yes.
Have you met the requirements under the statistics legislation of ensuring that they're properly funded?
I'm happy that we did. We had that formal meeting. We set it all out in a submission, the Minister, a submission template that we were discussing earlier to the Chief Minister. We had that robust discussion ahead. But we will be seeking to fund that in the years when it actually starts hitting, which is 2027 onwards. Other than that, I'm not aware of any.
Okay, so the business case has just been deferred from 26 to 27.
Yes. There's no scenario.
And that's in line with the deferral, keeping the 5-year cycle with the deferral during COVID.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I'll leave it there actually and move on to Deputy Curtis. Thank you.
Okay, we are going to touch on another facet of the sustainable wellbeing, but looking more to future Jersey vision and long-term planning, Chief Minister. Yeah. From the same quarterly hearing that we've drawn those questions from, we discussed future Jersey vision, and it was noted that it was still standing the test of time. However, you felt that a reordering of priorities may be necessary. Mm-hmm. So in the context of this 2026 budget, where was that reordering considered necessary, and did any reordering take place?
I think for the 2026 budget, we've pretty much stuck to the Future Jersey plan as it is. I think it's probably a job for the next government to look at a refresh of the Future Jersey plans. When we looked at it, we think it still holds very well. It's very good. So I was talking in future tense really.
Yeah, and I think the other view in the Council of Ministers was it's better looked at alongside Bridging Island Plan and other big strategic issues that are coming up, rather than preempting that.
So it wasn't
next
felt.
government.
So it wasn't felt that in the context of any local or global conditions, or ones such as housing availability or global
I'd
volatility, there wasn't a need at this point to readdress any
Say
priorities.
from some members of Council of Ministers precisely the opposite. They thought it was more relevant than ever, particularly with regards to community wellbeing.
Okay, you mentioned perhaps a time to check into that is the Bridging Island Plan or the next Island Plan review. Given we don't have a timetable for that, looking forward beyond this budget, does that mean there's a chance that the next government, it's your view then, Chief Executive, given you'll be still in post, that it won't be a chance even in 2027 to be re-reviewing these priorities?
I think it's for the next government.
If my view is the Bridging Island plan needs to be reviewed as quickly as possible, because we've seen significant changes since it was put in place. And I think what Chief Executive is saying at that time, when we're looking at those big strategic documents, that's the time to review some of the other strategies that sit alongside it.
Okay, I think one area we've also discussed is whether some of these elements, like sustainable wellbeing, like tying work to Future Jersey, is retrospective or proactive. So, was there any change in approach in this budget to assessing how the budget addresses Future Jersey and those island indicators?
Were there any changes?
Changes to how you prepared the budget 2025 in assessing whether the budget meets any particular priorities?
I think we stuck
Or
to
was
the
it a very
same,
similar
to the same
process?
plan, really. Yeah.
We did do a deep analysis of all the spending for the past 6 years on that basis. I don't know if we narrowed it down to that one,
We do
of which
have,
this was part, but not.
yeah, we do have that data as part of the work that we've been doing, and the All States Members briefing on the 26th of September is the output of that, and we will publish that in due course. And within that, there's an analysis of the kind of 24-year period.
One area as well you touched on, Chief Minister, is investing in Jersey.
Yep.
And I believe you described that investing in Jersey programme was a response to the criticism that common strategic priorities could be too short term. So looking to this budget, looking to investing in Jersey being a part of or aligned to this budget, what tangible differences will the Investing in Jersey programme, if realised, deliver compared to the common strategic priority approach of driving government's agenda?
So the Investing in Jersey programme will rely upon states approving the Jersey Capital Investment Fund. We're hoping law drafting is being worked on now, so we hope before the budget to provide a lot more detail around that fund as requested by Scrutiny and other members. When that fund's put in place, it will ring-fence capital expenditure. So when the budget is agreed, the capital expenditure will be placed into the Capital Investment Fund, only to be changed by a States Assembly decision, rather than be able to be changed at, shall we say, the whim of a minister. And that will provide, I think, the security we need to maintain a strong capital programme, because it's clear that our infrastructure and public realm has been underinvested, and that's starting to show its age now in certain areas.
Do you see that model of a capital investment fund and the approach of managing finance, especially for capital, as something that you expect can then be tied to how you measure future Jersey kind of indicators? So is that model something that will help you align further the delivery of a large amount of spending with ultimately the indicators we measure Jersey's long-term planning?
Certainly in debating it, we thought it would. Again, it's up for debate, but the thing that was very exercising the ministers was the habit, and it is a habit, of cutting capital spending in year to fund day-to-day activities. I think everyone succumbs to that pressure in every organisation. It's slightly compounded by an annual budgeting process in the situation we find ourselves in post-2019. And I think the Chief Minister and other ministers felt that was a habit we had to break And going back to the chair's question earlier about some ministers' frustrations, of course, when we did the CSP, if you prioritise, it means you can't do everything that you want to do. Some of the things that ministers really wanted to tackle and are concerned about, the infrastructure minister would fall into this category in terms of the degradation of of the public asset base. We felt didn't really lend themselves to sort of knee-jerk jumps in revenue budgets. They really needed to be rooted in this kind of structure to make sustainable progress. And when you look at the OECD index of quality of life indicators, Jersey sits right on the mean, 49th percentile. Tackling that and moving it up to where we want it to be, which I think is top quartile, would need to have this kind of approach to infrastructure. So that was the kind of the debate.
I guess, I mean, my last question here is that approach of being able to address capital is one thing, but tying it back to where one invests capital, where one prioritises, given this budget is seeking that kind of in-principle decision to go ahead and bring forward legislation we hope in 2026, I think you want.
And I think that was probably the catalyst behind the thinking of how do we guarantee long-term investment, or the investment is going to stay there for the improvement of our infrastructure. It ties in with the future Jersey, and especially with the environment and with the built environment and well-being aspect, but also with the CSP priorities. Affordable homes, for example. Suddenly we realised that there's a lot of sites, a lot of potential for affordable homes that cannot be built because the drainage is just not up to scratch. And you will notice, probably to the frustration of a lot of island motorists, that sort of there's been an acceleration on the work to improve the main drains, and that's starting to. So that was basically, in simple terms, the catalyst, and that extends to other areas as well.
Thank you. The OECD Better Life Index has been mentioned a couple of times today and previously, and I think we've been encouraged as a panel to hear that coming up repeatedly. How is this being used to develop the Invest in Jersey priorities? You said there's a clear link there between the two. Can you just explain a bit more about how it's being
I
used?
think it just pick up on what the Chief Minister said. If you look at, Paul might want to say more because he and Ian spend a lot more time on it, but if you look at the affordable living, if you look at what drags our score down, I put it that way, even though our score is respectable, but if you look at what's it stopped being as high as it would be, affordable living is one of those, or everything around the cost of housing is one of those, and a big feature of Invest in Jersey is figuring out, as you invest and reorder your estate. So an obvious example of this is some of the debate that's been had about the higher education campus. Can you reorganise things to actually create opportunities to address affordable living at the same time as you're trying to actually address some of the community well-being issues around education? So it's looking at it in that way to see if we flick one switch, will 3 lights come on? So it's that kind of thinking as we look across the index that went into Invest in Jersey, but Paul can say more.
Yeah, so in the short term, you can see in the budget that areas like Fort Regent are given money for the first time. That links directly from the vibrant and inclusive part of the island indicators, which, as you say, uplift into the OECD overall framework. You would also see in the coming years, as we sort of in the detail right now of the Investing in Jersey programme, making sure that there's kind of plans within plans. You will see plans for Andium, for States Jersey Development Company, and others in the housing space. And as we move into kind of the future of the Highlands campus, you'll see that in future budgets. What we're doing right now is taking the 4th of August document as our strategy and making sure that there's detailed programme management within all areas of government, because actually it's a very, very cross-government initiative.
Thank you. And with regards to kind of ongoing monitoring, but then particularly comparisons with other OECD jurisdictions or peers, how does that work? Is that an ongoing process that we're committed to already, or do you have to fund it as you go? How does that work?
So, so the good work that Statistics Jersey does with our island outcome indicators means that that data is lifted and put into OECD in order to be comparable. The thing we need to kind of be clear about there is most of those indicators are kind of at least 1-2 years in between each checking. So we have to also look at the kind of the risk registers and the service level performance indicators to see kind of more real time changes. That's where a lot of our focus is. OECD is useful, but we need to have a kind of that more medium term strategic assessment of how we compare with other jurisdictions, because they are also in a situation where many of their indicators only move every 1 or 2 years.
Do you ever look to do anything anything in between comparing jurisdictions that then might kind of be published, or is it just that the indicators, the very formal framework, or are there other measures?
So I think it was 2 weeks ago, Statistics Jersey produced its latest COFOC analysis, the analysis of government expenditure against other jurisdictions. I know you've seen it, and this is the second iteration of it. So that's becoming a really useful set of data that we can track over time. And then, as I mentioned, the 26th of September event with states members also used that data to consider. Jersey had a very significant period of public sector growth between 2018 and 25. What happened in those other jurisdictions, our neighbouring, including OECD countries, and are we an outlier or are we part of that trend?
Great, thank you. I think we've touched on a review of the future Jersey vision and saying that's something for the next government to look at. But in your view, Chief Minister, how do you see that happening, and so that it links to budgets in the future as well?
I think the process of in the process of compiling the CSP, the Common Strategic Policy for the new government, linking that to Future Jersey and wellbeing work has worked well, and I think that should remain the driving force. That has to be the foundation of everything. And we do think about. We looked at Future Jersey set up in 25 and 24. We did it again 25, and agreed that was still an appropriate and relevant, very relevant foundation to base the bulk of the budgeting work on. But again, it's up to the next government to decide if they want to stay with that or refresh it.
And given that, I think there was a 2-year consultation process that built up to developing kind of Future Jersey.
Yes, yeah.
With that in mind, and that I think there's broad agreement among your government and leadership at the moment that it needs a new reworking. Is it time to start the next public consultation to get the wheels in motion for that to happen soon?
Well, I think the 2 years was from a standing start, if I remember.
Yes.
And so, I mean, I don't think it would take that long. The next government could probably do that in a shorter period, given that the foundation is already there. And I can't see right now. I mean, no, the world's changing quickly, but I can't see any major changes being required to it.
No, I would agree with that. I mean, it's a very useful and
well-researched. There's one area that I've found, I think ministers find the most frustrating in Jersey, is how we bear down harder on the cost of living, because we don't have all of the levers to pull, and I think that could perhaps have more of a priority in the Future Jersey work. How we can be, as you know, we only have our fiscal policy. We don't really have any monetary policy. So I think it's been a course of frustration for this government that we can't do more in that area.
I think it was interesting when I was looking at the budget that if you go around your wheel there, there's 2 areas that are not covered by the CSP, and one of them is about inclusion, and the other one is about the environment. And I just wondered what thinking had gone in from a budgetary perspective about, they're not in the CSSP, those 2 particular areas.
I'm just trying to remember the 13th point.
13th one was carbon neutral.
Carbon neutral, yeah.
But there was one about the environment that's covered directly by CSP.
Well,
and certainly the inclusion bit. And again, I won't steal Deputy Stevenson's funder, but it
You're
You
right.
you
No.
don't relate the investment in children's services and the youth centre and things to inclusion. You relate that to, what do you relate that to?
I would relate that to the putting children first and giving
Yeah.
children the best start in life. Inclusion, I'm talking about things like accessibility, I'm talking about diversity, I'm talking about
Yeah.
equity.
Yeah.
All of that broad thing is not within your CSP. Anyway.
No, look, can I just
Yeah,
agree with you
finish.
on that, Chair? And that, I mean, outside of the CSP, there's a lot of important business as usual. And I think those are areas that the next government will consider in elevating to the CSP, if you like.
We're,
It's quite
I know
quite
Deputy
reasonable to
Stevenson's got
consider
some
that.
questions
Yeah.
about that coming up. So Deputy Johnson, sorry.
Okay, a few brief questions on the general question of communication of the budget, if I may.
Yeah.
Well, the general one, do you consider that the government's communication of the proposed budget has been effective? And how do you rate the success of these communications? So how do you measure it?
I mean, I remember when I was sitting on the other side of the table promoting the budget with Scrutiny. Would somebody like to talk about where we are with that?
Yeah, so I can probably
Yeah.
cover it at a
Your
high
pop-up
level.
sessions, Andy?
Yeah.
So we haven't offered pop-up sessions as such, but we have done sort of a campaign. So following the recommendations that the panel made last year, so working with our colleagues in the comms team, we obviously did a press release. We have a child-friendly version of the budget, which is, if it's not published, it will be shortly. There's a video that supports that to try and explain it and make it more engaging. Whilst that's obviously for children, that doesn't stop anyone else reading it. Not
Actually,
Necessarily
sounds
saying
very,
that
very good. Yeah, taught me quite a bit, actually. Yeah.
But we're also, in terms of engagement, we are also talking to the children's, to SIPES around works with their school councils networks as well. So we are looking at whether we can go and speak to children around what's in it as well. So sort of upping that level of engagement. But in terms of general communications, I think it's a very important document. There's obviously a lot of scrutiny processes covered in the media, regardless of what we do. So I do think it has, the messages have come out and will continue to do so as the budget is scrutinised and indeed debated.
Well, thank you for that. You've touched on a couple of my other questions, but just to elaborate on them, what you've done this year, what is different from previous years, and how do you consider it's been made more accessible to the public in general, and as you mentioned, the children in particular?
Yeah, so the children's one, we did do that last year as well. So we've continued on the success of that because it was something that was working well. So we thought we'd continue to do that. The other thing that we did differently was the way that we tried to get some of the key messages that the budget's presented through social media posts and other similar things. So just trying to make it a bit more, well, a lot of people now, that's how they engage and how they get their information is through social media rather than through mainstream media. So trying to make sure that we were covering those channels as well as the more traditional channels.
Thank you for that. And going back to the question of children, you already mentioned the youth-friendly version, as it were. We note that publication and also the video. How else has the government engaged with children and young people in line with participating standards? Are there any other measures you've taken regarding children other than those?
So there is a plan for more engagement as we go through the few months. So it is being finalised now, so I don't want to say it's firm commitments, but we're certainly talking about engaging with the school councils network and the youth parliament and seeking for what the opportunities are to talk to both of those bodies about the budget before its debate.
Just add to that, Conatab. So I attended Schools Council Network this week. There's another one planned for December of this year, in which case we'll talk through the budget with them in a child-friendly way. But the purpose of my visit this week was talk about the play strategy, which we call the play plan. So again, makes it easier for children and young people to understand it. So we presented a child-friendly version of that plan and asked them for their feedback on certain aspects of the plan. And, you know, there is no filter with children of that age. These were primary school students who told us exactly what they thought of it. Most of it, of course, was positive, and they had some really good suggestions in there. So that's how we're engaging with children and young people. The budget will do
Was
the
that a
same.
visit to one particular school?
No, so Schools Council is all the schools coming to one place at Highlands, and they spend a whole morning there So both the Minister for Children and Families and I gave speeches and interacted with each table. It was a really rewarding morning.
I can see that. And do you have such visits to individual schools as well, or not?
Yeah, there are some individual schools, but the whole point of the network is when children come to that, they will fan it out to each of their own individual schools. So there's a small cohort from each school who then feed that back through.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Chief Minister, do you believe that there's benefit in working towards the implementation of a gender-responsive budget for future budgets?
Malcolm, could you mind if Malcolm takes it?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's important to remember that all of our policy decisions are based around the discrimination law. So that's the starting point. And there's lots of things that we have done and will be doing to support a gender-responsive budget. So obviously the inclusion of free childcare is one big step towards that for young people. The provision of school meals, the implementation of the VORG recommendations, and the back-to-school bonus, so that parents will have access to a fund that will be able to fund their going back to school in September and the expenses that come with that. The other side of the scale is the extension of the Pension Plus scheme, which looks after dental care and optical care for pensioners. There's also lots that I can list. There's the health access prevention scheme for older people. We're reviewing the teachers' pay and conditions or their terms. We're also, the Chair mentioned the disability strategy earlier. We're putting more money into the disability strategy to make sure that we know that there was a recent review of how the strategy is performing. It was overwhelmingly positive. There were still gaps, and it's recognised that we do need to put more money and effort into bridging some more of those gaps. And of course, in the longer term, we're still looking at the development of a workplace pension scheme so that people have a more comfortable, affordable retirement. So there's lots of things that we have done.
Living wage transition.
And of course, the living wage transition.
So it's all there's lots of very positive policies there, but do you believe that the current steps taken during the policy development process and when you're setting budgets by considering the discrimination law, does that sufficiently ensure equitable distribution of public resources to meet the needs of all islanders? So looking at it in a broader strategic way rather than just individual policies and we need to do something to help older islanders and we need to do something to help families.
So I've got a definition from the United Nations and Oxfam which describes gender responsive budgeting, and it describes it as a budget that works for everyone, women and men, girls and boys, by ensuring gender equitable distribution of resources and by contributing equally to opportunities for all. All of those things that I've just described do touch all of those points. And the additional thing that I didn't mention was there was that proposition passed in 2024 about IVF and how that should be expanded, and Health and Care have expanded eligibility criteria to that scheme. So again, to support parents in growing their families.
Thank you. I think perhaps maybe it's for a broader discussion one day about the kind of fundamentals of a gender responsive budget process rather than just saying some of what we're doing meets the definition, because it's a process from the very beginning that people go on courses about and learn about and from the very beginning of developing policy. And I don't feel, but correct me if I'm wrong, that currently happens from the ground up.
I think it's embedded in our thinking. Whether it's framed as gender responsive budgeting might be a different thing, but I do think that all of what we do as a council is taking account of how do we fairly distribute funds, and that's why we got the throughput and the way that we have.
Okay, thank you. And was any gender analysis undertaken when developing this proposed budget? Is the budget gender sensitive?
In that respect, we haven't undertaken specific analysis. I think there was a feeling around the table that we are pushing in the right direction. We are looking at all parts of the community, and we just felt that that was enough without doing separate analysis on whether it does or doesn't meet certain criteria.
I think that's probably answers the next few questions there, doesn't it? Do you have any follow-ups you would like to? No, okay. You happy to hand over to
Yeah.
Deputy Johnson?
Oh, right, sorry, caught me unawares.
Constable, sorry.
That's the Minister unawares too. My questions relate to the Public Sector Ombudsman, if I may. In accordance with this panel's amendment to the 2025 budget, which was accepted by the Assembly, proposals for an Ombudsman or otherwise should have been brought forward in the budget to 2026-29. This has not happened. Neither has funding been specifically allocated for this. Perhaps you could explain the rationale for this.
So we did carry forward the £398,000 budget that was, I think, anticipated originally by the previous government. So that stayed in the budget. As you know, Deputy Scott has presented her findings and recommendations to the Council of Ministers in September. At the meeting before last, when it was considered, the Council of Ministers asked the Chief Executive Officer and officials to come back with some more detailed costings. And that's what we're expecting to get back at the meeting after that. Next end of October, is it? Or?
Most likely.
Yeah. So we're waiting for that, and then we'll make a decision.
Okay, and in correspondence, particularly a letter of 6th October, you noted that just short of 400,000 was in the budget, was accounted for this budget. Is this funding ring-fenced for this particular purpose?
Yes, in the Cabinet Office budget.
It's an underspend in the Cabinet Office. It's 50,000 of that was given and continues to be given per annum to the complaints panel until the future of data has been determined.
And you also explained that a financial assessment, including a cost-benefit analysis, has been commissioned in order to reach a final decision. When will this be completed? And when will the final proposal be brought to the Assembly?
Sorry, David, I wasn't clear. That was the work I was just referred to, and that's due to come at the meeting of next.
Chief Minister.
First meeting in November, yeah.
Yes, extending that, there's reference and emphasis on cost-benefit analysis. Could you advise what other factors are taken into account when considering?
I think at the end of September, Deputy Scott brought a very full presentation to the Council of Ministers, and I think one of the areas of debate around the table, or certainly where ministers felt that they needed more information or wanted more information before coming to decision, was the potential range of costs of not so much setting up the Ombudsman, but its in-life costs and how that would evolve, and looking at that against the budget that was intended for that purpose. I think there's obviously a range of outcomes in terms of the cost of anything, and Council of Ministers felt it wanted a bit more detail in that, and also to understand a little bit better the net benefits of some of those higher cost estimates versus what they have today in the complaints panel, and the options to improve what they have today in the complaints panel. So that was a nub of the debate.
Is that a fairly long-winded way of saying that there's some opposition to the setting up of an ombudsman within the Council of Ministers?
Can I answer
That's
that?
one for you.
No, there's not opposition. In fact, it's about the cost against a backdrop of what we've been talking about our, the fact that we have to tread very carefully now with taking on new costs. I think COM want to be more assured of what the realistic cost will be. So I think most ministers are in line with the state's decision that an ombudsperson is perhaps the right way to go, but we just want to be sure of the facts and the costs.
One of the things, on a tablet that we were able to show at that meeting is the evolution of costs of other things we've set up. So we're able to show them where we've gone with other ombudsmen in terms of their costs, other bodies, what might regard as equivalent bodies. And it's fair to say it's a one-way ticket in terms of real increases in costs over time. So again, these things we just need to think through and understand in the context of the wider budget and all the other priorities. And that's really what
Do you not think, though, that there's also a balance in actually what a public ombudsperson would save in terms of long-term improvement of public service?
Absolutely, yes. And those points were addressed in Deputy Scott's presentation. So it's looking, a cost-benefit analysis, and that's the work we're doing.
Yes, pitch our lines to some extent. Earlier in this hearing we referred to sustainable well-being, and I just want to make sure that COM will consider the other factors which were highlighted by the Original Law Commission report. Matters like the present complaints panel is underused. A handful of cases a year illustrate that it's not being used for what reason. The references to the fact that it's perceived as being a state's body and the state's graph are involved in it, which doesn't help. That's really the main thing. And if in other jurisdictions there have been, when it's been introduced, there's been perhaps I would say surge, but a large number of complaints made under the new system, that does indicate that there is a latent demand for a different system. And it can't be healthy for the island to have a lot of people feeling they're not able to register their complaints in a proper way.
Completely agree with that. We'll share the cost-benefit analysis with you, and we'll look to make our decision.
So, apart from the cost-benefit analysis, that these other factors will be fully taken together. And on costs, can I just final point, Chair? Can I just clarify that the saving of a new system, where I'm coming from, is that at the moment departments do invest a large amount of their resources in answering complaints, and I would like to have the assurance that the saving in their time will be offset against the costs you're talking about when you conduct the analysis.
Or would you?
Those aren't equivalent. There isn't equivalence there. That won't happen.
Sorry?
That wouldn't necessarily happen. There isn't equivalence here. There isn't necessarily a net saving to the way that we currently deal with complaints in the system with the setting up of an ombudsman.
But under the present system, a long complaint process, mainly with the Environment Department, will...
In most organisations, and it would be the same in ours, I would imagine, Connétable, you would investigate a complaint that comes in, you would try and resolve it as early as possible in the process, and if you couldn't resolve it, you would refer it to the Ombudsman, or more accurately, you would advise the complainant of the rights to refer it to the Ombudsman. That's how the Financial Ombudsman works as well. So it still doesn't remove the need for a healthy organisation to be
customer services.
We still need what we've got. So this is net additional cost, at least. Well, depends on your point of view, but it's net additional cost. So there isn't a saving within government from the establishment.
Okay, I just recalled reasons where the Environment Minister referred to them out. It had cost in answering a whole series of complaints, and that it seems to me if that department could be saving its costs there, that must be of benefit to us all.
I'm not sure it would be common for everybody to go to the ombudsperson as their first. If there's an issue, surely they would try and sort that out with the business. And if they didn't, the ombudsman would refer them back.
It's your safety net.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a court of appeal, really.
Deputy Renouf, did you have a question?
The Chief Executive referred to, we were able to show the escalation of costs of the Council of Ministers. I'm slightly questioning what the point of the review was that Deputy Scott did, because surely that could have been done at any stage of this process. It feels to me like it feels more like a rearguard action to sort of stop the ombudsperson rather than it could surely that question of the costs could have been presented to the Council of Ministers ages ago, preempting the work of Deputy Scott.
Well, it could have done, but the mood of COM a year ago was very different. The mood of Council of Ministers my estimation was that we weren't minded. We were quite sort of happy with the complaints process, and we wanted to look at how the complaints process could evolve. That was the preferred course of action then. Of course, since then, we've seen, I'd be reluctant to call them weaknesses, but challenges in the complaints process. And that, I think, has changed the thinking about it, which is why then we tasked that we've got to sort of do some further investigation, come back to us.
To come back to my point about a rearguard action, I mean, the Chief Executive has said of well-advertised scepticism about the escalation of costs around these bodies. Is it not the case that what's going on here is a sort of a final attempt to sort of put a spoke in the wheel?
I think it's a prudent approach. I mean, it's one of the reasons why we're in, shall we say, I'm not going to describe it quite in the way we have challenging financial positions, because we've said yes to pretty much everything. And if we look at the number of bodies, individual bodies that are receiving taxpayers' money, it's huge. And if we keep saying yes, how are we going to change the culture? So it's not putting us, but if we wanted to stop it, we would say we're not doing it, and we'll come back to the Assembly and we'll have the debate. We're not scared of that. It's really just more careful thinking about what we're going to spend money on. Now, I think this is it's potentially a good investment, providing, it's because of course once you set something up, it's very difficult to stop. Then they come back and statistics is come back. It's very hard to say no. When the ombudsperson comes back in 3 or 4 years and says, I need a £500,000 increase in my budget, who's going to, it's hard to say no. So there we are.
Final question is,
That's all it is, really.
talk about final proposals. Can the panel see them, and when can we see them, please? When do you anticipate they might be ready for us to see the final proposals?
Paul's working on that.
After the Council Minister receives it, but you will, of course...
We're due to receive it towards the end of October, so as soon as we get it, we'll share it with you.
You're, of course, welcome to...
We're talking about later this month, aren't we?
November.
November.
Well, we're going to consider it. I've asked it to consider it at our first meeting in November, so I'm not sure the date of that.
Deputy Johnson,
Finished.
you have the next section of questions.
Sorry, yes. Right, on to a different topic, which is the non-ministerial department budget allocations. Can you please outline the process and where accountability lies for approving allocations to the budget relating to the non-ministerial departments?
Yeah. I can cover that if you want. So the accountability for the estimates is set out in the Public Finances Law. It specifies who it is that can put in requests to the Council of Ministers. As an example, the PAC would do it on behalf of the CNAG. There are other examples I could pull out, specifics if you're interested. The Public Finances Law also says what COM has to do with those, which effectively is that the estimates provided by those parties must be included in the government plan or the budget, although COM can then choose whether to comment on it, and they can also, it's very clear, it specifically says that an amendment may be brought to any of those amounts. So in effect, in layman's terms, council ministers have to put what the relevant authorities ask for into their budget initially.
Mm-hmm. And that will apply to any corporation sole.
It's non-ministerial departments is the specific. I'd have to look at the actual law, but yes, it's the non-ministerial.
And leading on to that, then, is there a process by which these non-ministerial requests for funding can be questioned and or not supported, as the case may be, if deemed not appropriate? And again, if so, who is responsible for making that decision?
So I think, if you'd like me to comment on this one, Chief Minister, I think it's a matter of we do try and work with non-ministerial departments to make sure that their requests are proportionate, are well justified, and take into account the wider finances of the Government of Jersey. The Minister for Treasury and Resources wrote to them this year just to talk to them and set out the financial situation before they put those requests in. However, obviously, Council of Ministers and the Minister do respect what the Public Finances Law says. So therefore, if they do ask for things, they are included, the estimates are included as requested by those bodies, what we try and do is manage it, I guess, through a collaborative process to try and find ones which would be straightforward for the council ministers to support in the budget as well.
So I think the official Andy's saying that basically we generally agree the budgets before they're put in, and if it was a case where it couldn't be agreed, they still have the right to put their budget in, and we would either have to amend it or probably.
Yeah, and there's another example. Obviously, departments are asked, or ministerial departments are asked to deliver savings as part of the overall balancing of the budget. The minister will often write to non-ministerials and say, are there any opportunities in your own departments? Can you commit to making any? Some say yes, others say no. And that's what gets included in the final
But generally, we find a consensus.
Yeah.
Can I move on to public sector spending? Just a few points. The 2026 budget, as estimated in last year's budget, was 1.141 million. And this year, this estimate this is for 2026, yeah? For 2026, it's gone up to 1.177. It's about a £36 million increase in the expected expenditure next year. Can you outline what has driven that?
Can I defer to Andy on that?
So that's the changes in the estimates for 26.
Yeah, changes in estimates to 26. Sorry, I'm just making sure I'm looking at the right numbers to give you a proper answer.
Up from 1.14.
1.14 up to 1.177.
Yeah.
It might be better that I come back to you with a proper answer so that I don't mislead you, but I would imagine that the biggest change will be the allocation of pay awards that's been made within 2026, and then the other changes such as growth. But if it is okay, I would rather come back and confirm that to you. I don't necessarily have the reconciliation of that number. We tend to look at the bottom line, including reserves. So
Okay. Okay. Are there any examples you can point to in the budget for 26 where projects or services have been deprioritised as part of the reprioritisation process? You know, perhaps to increase funding elsewhere. Where has taken the hits?
Well, I could bring Jason at this point, but certainly in digital services, we had a going in programme, I think, of about 130 or just less than 130 bids, which we whittled down to an agreed 53 or so, and there were some casualties in there. So do you want to give some colour on that?
Yeah, there was two phases to that, building on what the Chief Executive said. So last year, we did a health check. We worked with all the departments, and we brought it down to 100 overall prioritised for the term of the government, with chief officers and departments. Right now, we're focusing on 40 projects that are funded and part of the plan.
What risk analysis was done around those kind of changes?
Firstly, the key priority driver for the priorities is Tier 1 risks. So it was driven by the risk management framework, the enterprise risk management approach. It was undertaken with chief officers, with their teams. So I would say a fair amount of risk analysis. In addition, the underlying IT infrastructure, so there was two specific programs which we felt were important or included in that, was driven by a significant amount of risk analysis, what we called the health check last year, and other things that we've carried out since. So I would say significant.
And the CSP. So essentially, if the project was directly related to the delivery of the CSP or to Tier 1 risks, it was more likely to to make the fine cut things that went out of that, and those would be some of those things would have been dear to the hearts of ministers. It's fair to say.
So 60 projects came out.
Yeah.
That must have an impact somewhere.
Well, officially, they're paused at the moment for the right time when budget,
Less
resources
project
and
managers
priorities
from
come in.
consultancies and government's one of the impacts.
Could I ask, Chief Executive, I mean, going to digital, obviously, projects are often one-off deliveries to then support a service. Do you have any examples of what we might consider ongoing services performed by departments that were deprioritised beyond those of kind of digital projects? Are there services that that functions of government were delivering that have been deprioritised as well?
Well, I'll let Jason come back. That particular exercise, that
I'm thinking outside of digital. I'm thinking kind of any of the other functions of government that might be delivering kind of day in, day out business as usual.
Using our using our consultancy restriction lever, there's definitely been, I've forgotten the name of the project, but essentially the, what do we, forgive me, what do we call the coastline management, the coastline management at Harford Park? There's a number of requests for technical consultancy and feasibility work relating to that piece of work, which the department were keen to progress, which we haven't progressed because, well, that's a very important project. Looking further out to invest in Jersey, we didn't feel that those were things that absolutely had to be done in the current financial year. So that's a sort of that's the sort of thing that would definitely have happened before these restrictions came in. The department would have gone ahead. So there's areas like that.
That's again a project. That's a kind of, we're going to do probably 1.5 day project. Are there examples of services within departments that kind of, from that top level view, where you've had to deprioritise, have seen a change to their function? That will happen in 26, 7 and 8 and 9, and you're setting a kind of a deprioritisation to balance a budget.
There hasn't been any discontinuation of departments and functions, save for the stuff we've already written to you about before, in the Cabinet Office in particular, and in the Chief of Staff in these areas that used to be built around the Chief Minister's office. So there's a fair bit of pruning there in the performance unit, central performance unit.
And those sort of
Yeah, so those, other than those ones, as part of these savings plans last year and this year, there's not been any other discontinuation yet that I can give you today.
If we look at the Environment Department, it's taken an absolute cut on its 25 budget and doesn't recover its budget, for example. So given inflation as well, that's a significant long-term reduction in funding for the Environment Department. What kind of analysis goes on to make sure that that's not leading to risks in that area? I'm looking at the figures on the revenue heads of expenditure.
I'm not sure if that department was benefiting
2025,
from, was it benefiting
it was
from
11.7 million.
exceptional funding?
It's
due to-
11.1. It goes up again then to 11.4, but doesn't recover its funding level.
So just to be clear as well, the numbers that are included in that table don't include inflation provisions for future years. So that is staying static at the 11,465.
Yeah.
That sort of will be inflated. Pay awards and additional money will be
Real
allocated.
Terms, but in real terms, it stays below the figure from
So
2025 throughout the period.
It is roughly 300 less than it was in 2025. That is likely to be through the delivery of savings, I would imagine. Whether that's a material thing or not, I think it's probably worth, whilst environment colleagues aren't here to speak to it, the environment budget has grown significantly over the period that the Chief Executive spoke to.
Sorry to interrupt, includes planning regulation.
Yes.
Yeah, that planning regulatory officials.
It's also one of the, as a small department, it was one of the biggest net beneficiaries outside of health and education of the 68% growth in cash spending since 2018. So whether you expect it to go up forever, I don't know, but it certainly has one of those departments that's taken a big jump in its level of budget in the last decade, and now it's flattening off a bit. It's not the only one like that.
It was a one-off jump in 22. But yes,
There are also some transfers in there which I'd need to come back to.
Reflected new requirements.
I'll come back to you with the detail what there is, but
Okay.
543k of the reduction is something that's currently being paid for by the Environment Department moving to another department, but I would have to confirm exactly what that is. I can do that.
I think I've covered up that area.
Can you update us on the delivery of the 20.3 million allocated in savings for 2025 across all departments, please? Has it all been delivered, and how has the impact of those savings on service delivery and operations been measured?
2025 savings?
25,
Yeah.
20.
Yes, so we work with departments, the finance business partnering team speak very closely with all of them to make sure that plans are in place to deliver them in the year. So we have had updates on that, and that was used to inform the budget. And in the main, most of those targets have either been delivered or departments have confidence that they will be delivered by the end of the year. Obviously, as part of the way that the accountability works, they have already been removed from budgets, so therefore accountable officers will be held to actually delivering them through that managing the bottom line as well. But we do have specifics. In terms of the impact on services, that's probably a question more for the individual accountable officers who could give you far more detail. But what I would say is quite a lot of the savings that have been delivered, for example, against the role savings, have been made through managing vacancies, so either people who leave or people who vacancies that are already existing not being recruited to, so supported by that vacancy freeze that's happened. So obviously the fact that someone wasn't there and then continues not to be there should have in theory, a lower impact than actually removing someone from a post. Obviously, if someone leaves, there may be a need to reorganise resources within the department to make sure that all the services continue to be delivered at the level that they need to be.
I've never known any organisation to ask for its budget to go down or any accountable officer to say it's not very difficult. So it'd be easier for me to tell you if I could remember who doesn't have a challenge. But certainly let's talk about challenges where we have been a bit more empathetic based on our understanding of what's happening in the service and the issues. So one of those has been Justice and Home Affairs, where there have been some cost pressures, largely occasioned by events in recent years which have changed, I think, our approach to some of the risks involved. That's one of them that I would say, and I think we've had similar from I&E in particular around some of the pressures relating to core infrastructure.
Thank you. Are thematic and best value reviews that were established in 2023 to assist departments with achieving savings still being implemented? And if so, for which departments?
So, we've got healthcare Jersey. Is this the right area, financial recovery programmes?
So
Yeah.
I think the short answer is that things have moved on since that thematic review. It doesn't mean that the principles of those reviews aren't still helpful when accountable officers look at how they deliver savings, but they're not being driven as individual work streams in the same way that they were when those were first kicked off.
Thank you very much. And then looking for this proposed budget, £24 million worth of savings is proposed for 2026. Do you believe this is achievable, considering it's allocated to health, the financial recovery programme, roles and office consolidation? How are these savings going to be realised in 2026?
Do you want me to run through those?
Yeah,
okay, fine. So, and correct me if I'm wrong. So reduction in roles is 9 million, 2026. Achieved primarily by removing vacant posts, which minimises the impact on service disruption, and then more focus on removing and restructuring management layers and consultancy reliance. Office consolidation, the move to the new office is expected to show combined savings of 4.4 million between now and 2028. Of course, that starts to deliver lower running costs right across the estate. And I know Andrew's doing some more work on how we might further consolidate. And then with healthcare, Jersey focuses on 9 million in 2026, focusing on efficiency gains, improved planning control, better use of staff and resources, better procurement and contract management, and income optimisation. I think that just about covers it. There's some pay management as well.
Is it, in your view, Chief Minister, are they achievable savings? And I'd just add to that the note that 9 million in removing vacant posts, and we've just heard that made lots of savings by removing vacant posts. How many more vacant posts are there out there?
I was going to say, some vacant posts, there is natural attrition in government, not because people are unhappy, but because people move on. So one could argue if you have a vacancy freeze, there's always more vacant posts that come through. The challenge is more around how you reorganise yourselves to make sure that the remaining posts deliver all the services and have the right skills to deliver that. In terms of deliverability at 9 million, I think Andrew alluded to, it will not be straightforward. Officers will have to work to make sure that they've got plans that deliver those savings whilst also protecting the services that they're required to deliver. But indeed, that is what they are paid for, and that is part of their job. So that is, whether it's deliverable, in my view, 9 million as a percentage of overall £1.2 billion worth of expenditure should be very deliverable within the government. Equally, the office savings, those all should be deliverable as long as the buildings can be vacated, etc., along with the plans that were set out to make sure that those savings were delivered.
And then 9 million in health, is that achievable?
Well, I think set against a backdrop of the increase in the health budget and the reorganisation, the work that's starting on digital and preventative care, these are the figures that health feel confident in delivering. Yeah.
And
They have a very comprehensive programme with lots of ideas which are generated. To manage to get that 9 million out, you have to have more than 9 million worth of ideas to actually realise all of those. So the department would be able to speak in far more detail onto that if you were to want more, and I'm sure you will when you have subsequent hearings with them. But they have certainly indicated that yes, it is deliverable, although tricky, I think.
Yeah, I think their particular challenge in recent times has been they've actually saved money in certain areas, but there's big areas of the budget where they don't have as much control over costs as one would ideally like. I think we've discussed this before. They have seen a very significant real terms cost increases from tertiary care, i.e. other hospitals, that where we will send patients to for one reason or another, which reflects the pressures, of course, of the UK hospital system itself. So for them, it's a case of, one of the things we're trying to do over time is give them more areas of their own budget where they realistically can say, we actually can control this spending and things won't just happen to us. So we're getting better at that, I think it's fair to say, but that's kind of the challenge, particularly in that department more than others.
Okay.
A lot of unexpected bills arrive.
Thank you. And just finally from me, are you expecting any or planning for any redundancies as part of those 24 million proposed savings?
I think the answer is not planning for.
No.
Not currently. No, I think natural attrition is the word used as vacancies become. We reorganise around those. Yeah.
Thank you. We're going to move on to looking at some of the capital, in particular information technology. And the budget 2026 allocates funding to a failure of frontline IT services, IT and digital services, 25 million in 2026, and across this plan 41 million, and cyber defence. I think we've mentioned that these are key risks on your risk register.
Growing risk, yeah.
Growing risk. Could you then take some time to explore the kind of how that level of risk has been assessed, and given you're using the terms growing, Chief Executive, how the funding then is going to be used against those risks?
Want me to
Oh yeah,
take
go
that
ahead,
question?
Jeff.
Thank you for the question. Much analysis and much thinking this year with the increased external threats, what we've seen in other organisations. Part one I mentioned earlier, we undertook quite a comprehensive health check of our system. So we looked at our infrastructure, looked at our applications, we looked at the service management across the piece. We developed a programme plan that we now call Triple IP, IT Infrastructure Improvement Programme. This is replacing old systems, poor integration, overall increasing the resilience, improving the estate. That is driven by a very structured risk management approach in the programme. We have a number of senior architects looking at each area of the system and diverting the spend in the appropriate places, so prioritisation. The third element on the cyber side is increase in defences. I'm very happy to come back with a detailed private hearing presentation to go through that. It wouldn't be appropriate in a public forum because there's commercial sensitivities to some of those plans and some of those details. But it's comprehensive, and I'm confident that we're putting the right effort in the right places. But a lot of focus and a lot of effort this year. It's been a very concerning year for a large number of organisations, and we've looked very deeply as a result at our infrastructure and our estate. Also working with our partners. Some of our key suppliers have given a particular practical advice, which has been well received with where we put our efforts and our focus.
Okay, you've preempted where I was going, which is the cyber programme and its delivery in 2025. And noting there is a level of sensitivity, but spend allocated was 2.5 million for this year. And it would be good to know whether, as a department, you've been able to operate the programme in line with your expectations during this year for the cyber programme.
So because of what I just said, there's been an increase in tactical spend on what we call the operational security enhancements. So practical things, changes in particular use of configuration and tooling, monitoring how we use our SOC, our Security Operations Service, that we've talked about before at previous hearings. We've not spent as much on assets in this year, in 2025, so we deferred some of the spend to the back end of the programme in 2027. Because we wanted to get the focus on the tactical things with how the external threat analysis has increased very significantly, particularly this year.
Okay, and there is a small increase against what the 2025 budget predicted for 2026, moving from 3.6 million to 3.714. It's a small amount difference, but it would be good to understand, given the competing pressures, how that kind of assessment of the programme and how needs change kind of was formulated.
Could I just check, you're referring to the cyber programme?
Yes, still on cyber.
Okay. I'll have to come back to you on that because my understanding when we put the budget together is we hadn't changed the overall profile. Andy may have some data in front of him on it. We'd simply reprofiled to move some of the asset investment to the back end in 2027. So I hadn't understood we'd increase it. So I'll come back to you specifically unless Andy's got anything in front of him now to confirm that.
No, that's correct. So we have added, so we've taken the overall programme and just moved the cash into the right years to make sure that Jason's got the money when he needs it. That's so it's set out towards the back of the budget.
So it's a phasing kind of.
It is phasing,
plan
it's
to
not new
ensure
money.
you can deliver.
Yes.
It's occasioned by, in global terms, trying to make sure we close front doors, given what we understand to be the threat and given the experience of other organisations. So tactical spend is really about security within the existing estate as opposed to asset replacement and those sorts of things.
Okay, so moving from the cyber programme to the IT infrastructure investment programme, which is a grouped head of expenditure with a total of 6 million for 2025, 6 million in the 2026 budget. Could you provide, again, likewise, an update, hopefully a less sensitive update on the delivery of that, whether it's been on track and any challenges faced that you expect to then roll over into next year, or any lessons learnt?
Indeed. First of all, the focus is split into four main areas: infrastructure, applications, network, so the actual data network itself, and then service delivery overall, so more the methods and the approaches. For it, good progress this year. I'll give you some examples on a report in front of me. We have reduced the number of the shared services around areas such as CCTV, telephony and certificate management, which has simplified the estate, given us improved resilience. Another area on the infrastructure side is we've updated some much more modern file servers. So that's helped us a lot with resilience, and we're very pleased with that. And then the third area is we've removed quite a lot of old hardware in the data centres, more than 10 years old. So we're pleased with that progress too. And they're just some examples. I'd need more time to give you a more thorough overview. That would probably be better with a private hearing, because some of that does have commercial sensitivities with which organisations we're spending and where we're changing our online on them.
So what would be good to understand, given especially the triple IP, if I get it right, infrastructure improvement IT programme, or in some order, is how the reliance on external consultancy, how as a department you've managed what is a broad spread of change to the IT estate in the context of a wider government position, and perhaps one for the Chief Executive, how any approaches to especially IT expenditure are considered in the round to what has been a changing policy, and whether anything's changed.
I'd say two things. The elevated risk around cyber and the nature of that risk facing everyone, but particularly facing organisations which have a multifaceted, aged estate with hundreds and hundreds of systems, as you might imagine, that is an elevation of risk. We have an exceptions policy on consultancy contracts and specialist roles, and we've had to lean on that because of the fairly rapid change in the risk profile and the specialist nature of some of those skills. At the same time, for what you might regard as the longer term strategy that Jason and the team are pursuing, those principles still apply. In workforce planning terms, what we would like to do in digital services, as we've started to achieve in health and education, is we really do need to have a much stronger participation in growing our own and having a proper academy and apprenticeship structure to try and build those skills on islands and make those good jobs and careers for people on island, rather than having recourse and being at the mercy of the contractor market. So all of that work's still underway, but as it relates to cyber, the advice given to the COM, which we've respected, is that we have a particular need for particular skills in the short run, and we obviously suspend the policy or make exceptions to it where that happens. Is that fair?
Yeah, sorry.
Of course, you've got the cyber programme budget, you've got cyber remediation as part of the IT investment third eye programme. But it's just trying to, it's also trying to,
box with exceptions.
it's trying to work out whether, especially looking to the 2026 budget, anything is changing with regards to your approach. You've mentioned trying to grow internal talent. Obviously, there's a technology strategy we've been lightly briefed on, and it's understanding whether there's going to be a change, or the 2026 budget doesn't reflect those changes that you're proposing, because it's still a capital heavy budget and it's still got the allocations as of 2025.
I can give one area of change to illustrate that, but no, we're not intending to increase the overall spend. It's a flat plan. We're pressured on project demand, as I talked about in the first part. And one of the key roles with new digital projects is systems architects. So what we've done is developed a managed services framework with 4 on-island companies to provide us burst capacity for system architects. Typically, you need those system architects for capital projects for periods of 6, 9, 12, 18 months. And we've recently awarded this in the last few weeks. It's been an exercise we've been carrying out the last 6 months with commercial services. So we're using that to control our vacancies, to use the burst capacity from on-island companies to bring in the resources when we need them. My expectation is the demand for capital projects will balance off once we get a bit of a control on some of the very old systems. There's a really big program going at the moment called Transform, which replaces one of our oldest systems.
In ESH.
In the ESH area, replacing a very old system. So that's one example. And as Andrew touched on, implied, in part of our strategy is to build a IT skills academy, where over a long period of time we develop an internal resource base that's higher than what we have now, so we're less dependent on the third parties.
So will that mean that obviously this is the budget only fixes next year, but it's a 4-year budget. From running your department side, do you then expect to have to see requests going to the Chief Executive and ultimately to the next Council of Ministers to change what is forecast for that revenue for your department, to change to a model that is less reliant on consultants and external parties if you're looking to grow internal talent more? And
I'm not expecting in 2026, no. I'm happy with the budget plan for 2026. Over the longer period, with the success of that skills academy, I would expect the cost of capital projects to reduce because we'd have our own internal resource and it'd be less expensive. And in time, the revenue resource as well will drop. We don't have a detailed plan.
I understand the point. It's a fair point. Our ambition, which you see in the budget, is to self-finance our way with a flat budget by moving things from here to here, prioritising, deprioritising. But that's not just within digital services. One of the things that we've done already, but we need to do much more of, and we'll be engaging the COM on, is one of the other things we need to do is have the rest of the machine reduce its demands on digital services by the rest of the machine prioritising much better than it does today. So within digital services, we have this ambition of a relatively flat budget while we tackle all the things you've mentioned, but it will go up unless we stop the rest of the machine generating tickets, many of which I would argue are discretionary and shouldn't be in there when you're in a situation where you're in with the public finances.
Okay, and I'm going to wrap up my last kind of 4 questions on a topic into one to give a bit of time back to the panel around the digital government platform. So really, could you provide an update on the digital government platform during 2025 relative to its forecast expenditure of 600,000, and then in summarising, reflect on whether you're happy that the programme will deliver on its aims, given that this budget doesn't propose any funding in 2027 or any changes in 2026.
Thank you. Perfect timing. Thank you for the question. We presented the new system, digital government platform, to States Assembly members on Wednesday, and we had some good questions, good receipt. We've been very carefully testing the platform, not rushing it. It was essentially ready for production in April, and we've taken it through different stakeholders, different departments. We are intending to release the final part of operational testing for a digital government platform next week, and we'll invite all colleagues in Union Street and all States Assembly members. The part of that, that is an operational system. The part of that process is to receive feedback whether it is now ready for the public. We're expecting 4 to 6 weeks for that exercise to take part and receive the feedback appropriately. We haven't committed to a final go-live date deliberately because we want to get the feedback from States Assembly members and Union Street colleagues. But this year is our expectation for it. As for the 600k question, that's funded by the Transform programme, and that's to deliver the enhancements to digital government platform the Transform programme needs. There may be another project which is being considered to reuse the platform, which is very much part of our strategy, reuse to simplify systems, and that funded capital project might provide some extra cost for it. But it would not change the funding plan as you see it and written that's here. It's basically reuse of the technology with some new functional enhancements on what's already called DGP.
And is there sufficient revenue capacity to run and maintain the system in 2026 and beyond?
As it stands at the moment, my only caveat to that answer is we can't predict significant extra use. If there is significant extra uses, we'd expect those capital projects to come along with the extra revenue funding. So that would be self-balancing. But at the moment, yes.
Thank you. Okay, we've completed most of our questions, but I think Deputy Stevenson had a...
I just wanted to follow up quickly on the change of model to having an in-house academy and development of skills in-house. Just given the experience of one example, the communications department, I'd like to know in this case what assessments have been carried out that this is the best way to go. Is it most cost effective? Is it about quality? How have you determined that that's the right model to follow? And also I'd just add into that again, because of the experience of the communications model and the undoing of it a few years later, the impact on local companies of that decision, has that been taken into account?
Yes, it has. We're not saying with the Skills Academy that we're going to bring all the skills in-house. So, for example, cyber at the moment, best example, we have a security operations centre. It's a service provided by a company in the UK. It's a 24/7 operation. It's very fast changing. The tools, the methods, the skills, we couldn't keep up with them here in Jersey as a whole island, let alone the government. So our plan is to keep using that as an external managed service. I gave the other example of our system architects. At the moment, we're quite happy with the plan to use it from on-island companies. We're thinking about project managers, scrum masters, so that a more modern version of a project manager to move into a more agile approach. Right. So it's a kind of horses for courses approach. We're developing what we call a sourcing strategy as part of the technology, overall technology strategy plan, and that will answer your question in a bit more detail. That will probably be ready early 2026 with the work that my team are working on now for that.
Thank you very much. Conor Todd-Johnson, did you have any
No,
follow-up?
thank you.
Okay, Deputy Curtis? I know. I think Deputy Minister Mayor.
I'm just to return to the bigger picture for a final question. I mean, the Chief Executive has spoken very openly about the precarious nature of public finances. We've talked about the fact that we're using sources of funding that we haven't used in the past, such as the contributions to the Social Security Fund. Do you think that Jersey needs to face up to a big debate on taxation, spending, size of government? Is that a debate that is now urgent and needed to reshape what the idea is behind what kind of government we have in Jersey?
Yeah, can I just say we've had to rely on using our reserves, not the strategic reserve, but the other reserves. And this is 2026, I think, will be the first time we've actually put money back into the supplementation for the reserve fund since 2020.
The first year we put some in the last budget.
In the last budget, so these two, we've reinstated that. But to answer your question, I think the short answer is yes. I think that again, I'm not passing it down the road, but that's something that I think the next government, next assembly will have to consider. We are a low tax model, and we want to stay as a low tax model if we can. We need to review certain charges. We need to review how much we save. We need to try, I think the best solution is from an economy point of view, try and grow our way out of this. There's no one solution. Curbing the growth won't be enough. Growing the economy won't be enough. It's going to have to be a combination of, a review of the approach we have to how we utilise taxpayers' money. A short answer to your question is that yes, I think that this next States Assembly will have to grapple with how we pay for the island's well-being over the next 50 years.
Is it an urgent problem, or is it just a kind of,
I don't
guess we should do, 'cause it's a new
think it's an urgent
I think
problem.
the challenge with it is, because it's so all-encompassing, it can always not be an urgent issue. You can just paddle along, and you see this in places like Japan and so forth, which went 30 years of effectively no growth, staring at it until eventually they could no longer. So all I think I was trying to convey is, and with that word, is that because of what we've had to do in the last 10 years to get through, and because all the advice to us is unfortunately the next 10 years could be, in geopolitically and economic terms, as risky as the last 10, there's just more of a risk that we can lose our footing in terms of the public finances, and we need to take, we need to take steps to be more secure, and it'll be for other people to decide over what time period to do that. But we'd be as well starting sooner rather than later to put more security into our footing around the public finances, and I think that's what the FPP have been saying as well. If you read the reports,
I wanted to say, if you are going to ask me if I agreed we're in a precarious situation, and if you mean by precarious, to quote Andrew, we're at risk of losing our footing if we're not careful, then we have to be careful moving forward now. We've seen the challenges, and the issue is how we make sure we stay in a sustainable position, and that's going to be a big debate for the next Assembly.
Chief Minister, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Assistant Chief Minister, officers, thank you very much. There were a few question areas that we didn't cover, but we'll go through those and put them into writing if necessary. And of course, our next opportunity will be the CSP hearing, which is taking place later this month, to pull together the remaining bits of the budget. So thank you.